Welcome to the Soul Dark Romance Stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I spent my entire life making careful decisions. Safe job, safe friends, safe routines that never invited trouble into my family's world. My mother raised me in a strict church household on the south side of Houston, where reputation meant everything and mistakes followed you forever. I believe that. I followed every rule she taught me. I became an accountant, paid my bills on time, and stayed far away from the kind of men people whispered about in church parking lots after Sunday service. But one reckless decision at a charity fundraiser changed everything. The event was held in a luxury hotel downtown, full of wealthy donors and people whose names appeared in business magazines. It was a masked gala, which meant everyone wore elegant black masks that hid half their faces. I told myself it was harmless fun, a rare night where I could pretend to be someone less careful than Danielle Price. That was where I met him. A tall man in a dark suit stood near the balcony overlooking the Houston skyline. His mask was simple and black, but something about his presence made the entire room feel smaller. People gave him space without realizing it. When he spoke to me, his voice was calm and quiet, with the faint accent of someone who had lived in more than one country. We talked for almost an hour about nothing important: the city lights, my job, his work in oil transport. I remember laughing more than I had in years. At some point he took my hand and asked if I trusted him. I should have said no. Instead, I followed him upstairs to a private hotel suite where the windows stretched from floor to ceiling and Houston glittered beneath us like a field of gold. The next morning he was gone. No note, no phone number, no name. For weeks I told myself it had meant nothing. Then I missed my period. 2 pink lines appeared on the test in my bathroom 3 weeks later. I sat on the edge of the bathtub staring at them while the world quietly collapsed around me. I had no idea who the father really was. I did not even know his last name. I was still trying to figure out what to do when my office phone rang on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. My coworker walked into my office looking confused. "Danielle, there is a man here asking for you." I stepped into the hallway and saw him immediately. The same dark eyes, the same calm expression. Only this time there was no mask. Han Suk-rin stood near the reception desk in a tailored black suit, while 3 silent men waited behind him. My entire office had gone quiet. He looked at me for several seconds before calmly pulling out his phone. He spoke a few words in Korean and hung up. Within 2 minutes, every employee on the floor received a call from upper management ordering them to leave for the day. The hallway emptied in stunned silence. When we were finally alone, he stepped closer and spoke in the same quiet voice I remembered from that night. "3 men asked about your route home this morning, and about what time you leave work." My stomach dropped. Why would anyone ask that? His eyes moved briefly toward my stomach before returning to my face. "Because they know you are carrying my child." Han Suk-rin's words hung in the empty hallway like a quiet explosion. For several seconds, I could not respond. My mind tried to reject what he had just said, but the truth was already sitting in the back of my thoughts like a shadow I could not ignore. I was pregnant, and the only man who could be the father was standing a few feet away from me, watching my reaction with unnerving calm. My throat tightened. "How do you know that?" His eyes did not leave mine. "Because someone else knows." That answer made my stomach twist. I glanced toward the glass doors at the far end of the office, half expecting to see strangers waiting outside. "You said 3 men asked about my schedule. That does not mean anything. It means everything in my world." His tone remained controlled, almost patient. "Men do not ask questions like that unless they plan to use the answers." I folded my arms instinctively, trying to protect myself from the weight of what he was suggesting. "I am not part of your world. I work in an accounting firm. My life is boring. Nobody is hunting me." Suk-rin studied me quietly, as if measuring every word I said. "That may have been true yesterday. It is not true today." I shook my head, frustration rising through the fear. "This is insane. You show up after disappearing for weeks and start talking about enemies and danger like we are in some crime movie." His expression did not change. "I disappeared because the night we met was not supposed to happen." Something in the way he said that made my anger pause. Then he continued in the same level voice. But once I learned you were pregnant, that changed everything. My hands tightened against my arms. And how exactly did you learn that? His gaze shifted briefly toward the hallway before returning to me. The clinic where you scheduled your appointment yesterday belongs to a company that provides medical services for several of my employees. When your name appeared in their system, someone informed me. I stared at him in disbelief. You are telling me you have people watching medical records. I am telling you that information travels quickly when powerful people are involved. The calm certainty in his voice was deeply unsettling. I opened my mouth to argue again, but stopped when he stepped closer. His presence filled the empty hallway with a quiet authority that made the air feel heavier. Danielle, 3 men from a private security firm linked to a political family asked questions about you this morning. They asked where you live, where you work, and which road you take home. My pulse began to pound again. Why would a political family care about me? His eyes softened slightly, though the tension beneath them remained. Because they care about me. The words fell into place slowly, like pieces of a puzzle I did not want to see completed. You think they would hurt me just to get to you? I know they would. Silence settled between us. My thoughts raced through every possible explanation, but none of them made the situation less frightening. If what he said was true, then the quiet life I had spent years building was already gone. I forced myself to ask the question that had been growing heavier in my chest. Who are they? The Choi family. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it made my stomach tighten again. They have been trying to control my business operations for 2 years. Oil transport, logistics, several city contracts. When I refused their proposal, they tried a different approach. Marriage. I blinked in confusion. Marriage. To their daughter. If I agreed, they would gain influence over everything I own. His voice remained calm, but there was something colder beneath it now. I refused. And now they want revenge. Something like dread crawled slowly through my chest. And I am involved because of the baby. Yes. The word was quiet but absolute. If you carry my child, you become leverage. Or a target. The fluorescent lights above us hummed softly. Outside the office windows, the afternoon sun still shone across the city like nothing had changed. But everything had. I rubbed my temples, trying to steady my breathing. I cannot just disappear into whatever world you live in. My family is here. My church is here. My job. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he spoke again in that same calm voice. Your brother was arrested for reckless driving 3 months ago. The charges could still become a misdemeanor if the judge decides to reopen the case. My heart skipped. How do you know that? Your mother's cardiology appointment is scheduled for Thursday morning at St. Luke's Hospital. The medication she needs costs nearly $800 every 2 weeks. My chest tightened painfully. Stop. But he continued anyway. The apartment you live in has a security camera that stopped working 6 months ago. Anyone could walk up those stairs without being seen. I took a step backward. Why are you telling me all this? Because if my enemies decide to pressure you, they will not stop with you. They will use anyone connected to you. My voice came out barely above a whisper. What do you expect me to do? He held my gaze steadily for a long moment before answering. Come with me. My heart pounded. For how long? Until the situation is resolved. That could take weeks, possibly months. The words made my head spin. I cannot leave everything behind like that. His expression softened slightly again. You will not be leaving it behind. You will be protecting it. I looked down at my stomach without meaning to. The reality of the baby suddenly felt heavier than ever. When I looked back up at him, he was watching me carefully. Finally, he spoke again. Danielle, I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to survive. For a long moment, I said nothing. The office hallway felt too quiet, too empty, like the entire building had stepped out of reality and left the two of us alone inside a conversation that could change my life forever. I stared at Han Suk-rin, trying to decide whether he was telling the truth or manipulating me with information he should never have known. The problem was that every detail he mentioned about my family was correct. My brother's reckless driving charge had kept me awake for weeks. My mother's medication really did cost nearly $800. And the broken camera outside my apartment had been reported to the landlord months ago without ever being fixed. If he knew those things, then he probably knew even more. I finally forced myself to speak. I cannot just disappear because you say I am in danger. My family would panic if I vanished without explaining anything. Sukrin nodded slightly, as if he expected that answer. They will not panic. I have already arranged for someone to contact your mother this evening. My eyes widened. You what? His tone remained calm. She will be told that your firm sent you to assist with an out-of-town audit. That happens often in accounting work. My jaw tightened. You cannot just control my life like that. I am not controlling your life. I am protecting it. His voice did not rise, but the certainty in it made my frustration flare. You do not even know me. I know enough. The words were quiet but firm. I know that you care about your family more than you care about yourself. And that makes you vulnerable to the kind of pressure my enemies use. I opened my mouth to argue again, but he suddenly glanced toward the glass doors at the end of the hallway. His eyes sharpened. Someone just arrived in the parking lot. My stomach dropped. What? He stepped closer to the window and looked down toward the street. A black SUV turned slowly into the lot outside the building. 3 men stepped out of the vehicle. Even from this distance, something about their movements looked deliberate, focused. My pulse began to race. Are those the men you mentioned? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched them carefully as they crossed the parking lot. One of them pointed toward the front entrance. Sukrin exhaled slowly. Yes. My heart slammed against my ribs. What do we do? He turned toward me with the same controlled expression he had worn since arriving. We leave. Now. My mind struggled to catch up with the speed of events. Leave how? They are already downstairs. There is another exit. His hand closed gently, but firmly around my wrist. Come with me. The urgency in his voice erased the last of my hesitation. We moved quickly down the hallway toward the rear of the office suite. The building felt eerily empty without the usual noise of coworkers and ringing phones. When we reached a narrow service corridor, he pushed open a metal door that led into a stairwell. The air inside smelled faintly of dust and cleaning supplies. Stay close to me. His voice echoed softly off the concrete walls as we descended the stairs. My heart pounded harder with every step. I could not stop imagining the men outside searching the building for me. Halfway down the stairwell, a muffled sound drifted from above. Footsteps. Someone had entered the office floor. Sukrin's grip tightened slightly on my wrist as he quickened our pace. We reached the bottom of the stairwell and stepped into a loading corridor behind the building. A sleek black sedan waited near the service entrance with the engine already running. One of Sukrin's men stood beside it, scanning the alley. The guard opened the rear door the moment he saw us. Inside, Sukrin guided me into the back seat before sliding in beside me. The car pulled away from the alley just as a shout echoed from the front side of the building. I twisted in my seat, catching a brief glimpse of the black SUV turning sharply into the lot. The men had realized we were leaving. My chest tightened as we sped into Houston traffic. I looked at Sukrin. They were really coming for me. His gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. Yes. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the panic rising in my chest. My life had changed completely in less than an hour. The familiar streets of Houston blurred past outside the window as the car moved farther from downtown and toward the outskirts of the city. After several minutes, the buildings grew farther apart, replaced by wide stretches of land and quiet residential roads. Finally, the sedan turned onto a long private driveway lined with tall oak trees. At the end of the road stood a massive estate surrounded by high iron gates and security cameras. The gates opened automatically as we approached. Armed guards stood at both sides of the entrance. My breath caught slightly as the car rolled through. This place looked less like a house and more like a private embassy hidden in the Texas countryside. When the vehicle stopped in front of the main entrance, Sukrin turned toward me for the first time since we left the office. His expression had softened slightly, though the tension beneath it remained. You are safe here. I looked at the enormous house towering above us and felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Safe might not have been the word I would choose, because the moment those gates closed behind us, I realized something else just as important. Leaving might not be an option anymore. The estate outside Houston felt less like a home and more like a fortified embassy hidden behind Texas oak trees. Tall iron gates sealed the long driveway behind us with a heavy metallic groan, and armed guards stood quietly along the perimeter as if they had been expecting our arrival all day. I stepped out of the car slowly, staring up at the massive structure ahead. The building was elegant in a cold, precise way. Long glass windows reflected the fading evening sky, and the entire property seemed designed for privacy and control rather than comfort. Sukrin moved around the car and stopped beside me. For a moment he simply watched my reaction, his expression unreadable. Then he gestured toward the entrance. "You should come inside." I hesitated, my gaze moving between the house and the gates that had just closed behind us. It felt like crossing an invisible line. Once I stepped through those doors, everything about my life would be different. Finally, I followed him. The interior of the estate was quiet and immaculate. Marble floors stretched across a wide foyer, and soft lighting glowed from recessed panels along the ceiling. Somewhere deeper in the house, I could hear faint voices from security staff communicating through radios. Sukrin led me down a long hallway and stopped outside a spacious bedroom overlooking the back gardens. "This will be your room." I stepped inside slowly. The space was larger than my entire apartment. A wide window overlooked acres of dark green trees, and the bed alone looked big enough for 4 people. Everything was tasteful and minimal, like a hotel suite designed for someone who valued privacy more than decoration. I turned back toward him. "How long am I supposed to stay here?" His answer came without hesitation. "Until the situation with the Choi family is resolved." I folded my arms. "That could take months." "Possibly." My frustration rose again. "You say that like it is normal. For you maybe. But I have a job, a family, a church community that expects me to show up every Sunday. My entire life cannot just pause because someone powerful wants to play political games with you." For the first time since I met him, Sukrin looked almost tired. He leaned slightly against the doorframe, his voice lowering a fraction. "This is not a game. They will try to force my cooperation by any means available. That includes intimidation, blackmail, violence." I held his gaze. "And you think hiding me here solves that?" "I think keeping you alive solves that." His answer was simple and brutally direct. The words drained some of the anger out of me. Silence stretched between us before I spoke again. "You said they wanted you to marry their daughter." "Yes. And if you did that, all of this would stop." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked at the floor for a brief moment before raising his eyes again. "That is what they believe." Something about his tone made me uneasy. "Why refuse then? It is a political alliance. Families like yours make those deals all the time." His expression hardened slightly. "Because my life is not a contract they can purchase." Before I could respond, footsteps approached down the hallway. A woman in a navy business suit appeared at the doorway. She bowed her head slightly towards Sukrin. "Sir, the Choi office released a statement this afternoon. They are accusing your company of violating transport regulations in 3 counties." I watched the shift in his posture. The calm restraint returned instantly. "Of course they are." The woman glanced briefly toward me before continuing. "They also mentioned rumors about a personal scandal involving you. Something about a pregnancy." My stomach dropped. The story had already started spreading. Sukrin's expression remained completely still. "Increase security patrols on the outer road. And monitor every media outlet that repeats that claim." "Yes, sir." The woman left as quietly as she arrived. I felt the weight of the situation settle more heavily around me. They are not even hiding it anymore. They want to destroy you publicly. Sukrin nodded slightly. Public pressure forces business partners to distance themselves. Political allies withdraw support. Eventually the target becomes isolated, and then easier to control. I stepped closer to the window, staring out at the darkening property. Everything about this place was calm and quiet, but the world outside it felt like it was closing in. I turned back toward him. "So what happens if they succeed?" His eyes met mine steadily. "Then they will try to remove the obstacle standing between them and the alliance they want." The meaning behind those words was clear enough to make my stomach tighten again. "You mean me?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. I swallowed hard. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach again. The baby had suddenly become the center of a war I never chose. Sukrin noticed the gesture and stepped closer, stopping just within arm's reach. His voice lowered slightly, calmer now. "Danielle, the moment you carry my child, this situation becomes something very different." Slowly he lifted his hand and rested it gently against my stomach for the first time since we arrived. His touch was careful, almost protective. In my world, family is not negotiable. He looked directly into my eyes, his voice quiet but unshakably firm. "And now you are family." His hand rested lightly against my stomach, steady and warm, as if the gesture itself carried a promise he did not need to explain. For a moment, neither of us moved. The quiet room felt suspended between two different lives, the one I had been living in Houston and the one I had just stepped into without fully understanding the consequences. I searched his face, trying to see whether this was simply another calculated move in a political conflict. But the expression in his eyes was not cold strategy. It was something more dangerous. Determination. I slowly stepped back, creating space between us. You cannot just decide that I am family because of a child. My voice sounded weaker than I intended. Suk Rin lowered his hand, but his gaze did not leave mine. In my world, blood decides many things. I shook my head and moved toward the window again, needing distance from the intensity of the moment. Outside, the estate grounds stretched into darkness, security lights glowing faintly along the fences. Somewhere beyond those trees, the city of Houston continued as if nothing had changed. My church would be preparing for Wednesday night service. My mother would be cooking dinner in the small kitchen of our house. They had no idea how quickly my life had shifted into something dangerous. What happens now? I asked quietly. Suk Rin remained near the doorway for several seconds before answering. Now we wait and see how far the Choi family is willing to go. I turned back toward him. And if they decide to keep attacking you? His voice lowered slightly. Then I make sure they understand the cost of that decision. The calm certainty in his tone sent a shiver through me. He was not talking about negotiations or legal arguments. He was talking about war. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady the mix of fear and confusion rising in my chest. This is not the life I wanted for my child. For the first time that evening, something softer appeared in his expression. It is not the life I wanted either. The honesty of the statement caught me off guard. He walked toward the door and paused there. You should rest. Tomorrow we will discuss how to protect your family as well. I watched him for a long moment before asking the question that had been lingering in my mind since he arrived at my office. Why are you really doing this? He did not answer right away. His eyes moved briefly toward my stomach again before returning to my face. Because the moment I learned about that child, the future I planned for myself changed. With that quiet confession hanging in the air, he stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him. I stood alone in the enormous bedroom, staring out across the silent Texas estate. And for the first time since the 2 pink lines appeared on that test, I realized something unsettling. I might already be standing at the center of a war that would decide all of our futures. The night settled quietly over the estate, but the world outside those gates was already shifting. Somewhere in Houston, powerful families were making decisions about Han Suk Rin's future and about the child growing inside me. They believed fear and pressure could break him. They believed I was just a weakness they could erase. But they had misunderstood something important. The man who placed his hand on my stomach and called me family was not the kind of man who surrendered what belonged to him. And whether I was ready or not, I had become part of that fight. If this story kept you hooked and you want to see what happens next in Danielle and Suk Rin's dangerous world, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you think will happen when the Choi dynasty makes their next move. Your support helps bring more dramatic stories like this to life.